Chapter 11 Temporary Place to Stay. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After becoming the god of the family, Hestia was directly driven out by him.And. Even the reason is quite good. You have already established a family, and you can't continue to live on my side. As the god of a family, you should be somewhat like a god. Him.And's words made Hestia have no choice but to leave even if she was full of tears, and she couldn't continue to stay here with her children. As a family, the first thing you need is a place where you can place your family. If you need to rob someone else's place to live, then you will undoubtedly fail as a god. The point was that Hestia couldn't stay with him.And with her own children. If it was only herself, Hestia must be thick-skinned. But with her own children, how could she show such a cheeky side? To this end, Hestia had to leave him.And's storefront and find a place for her family to live, but in the absence of any funds, there is no way to live in any place where people can normally live. After all, money is also a very important part of this society. This part plays a very important role in normal society and is also an inseparable part. So, no money means nothing. This also means that their Hestia family can't find a place to live in the direction of money, but need to approach places where money is not needed. What Belle thought of was the deserted corner of Orari in the original book, which was a rare ruin and a place that was not of interest. Lord God, is there any place for Orari that doesn't want money? Well, I do know that there is a place where money is not needed. It wasn't that Hestia didn't know that there was a place that didn't need money, but she also knew that no god would choose that place. It's just that now she doesn't seem to have the right to choose. After all, as a god, she really has no economic strength. But it was too bad to choose that kind of place as the family's base, which made Hestia a little afraid to look back at her first child. It's just that that place is an abandoned church. It's remote, dark, and it doesn't even have the necessary space for life. It's just that Belle doesn't really care about these issues. The most important thing for the Hestia family is not the so-called wealth, power and status, but Hestia itself. Hestia itself is the most valuable thing in the Hestia family, and things like wealth, power and status are obtained from subsequent development. After all, which god would dare to say that they have achieved freedom of wealth just after they entered the realm? Belle shook his head slightly. Lord God, please don't pay attention to those things. The development of the family is not achieved overnight, and the family that has just been established must not be able to spend a lot of money. Moreover, remoteness, darkness, and unknown are the most suitable for our family. Stage of the situation. Can you understand that? Of course. Because of my reasons, our Hestia clan is arranged in a place far away from other clans, and this is also to prevent my parameters from being known. Belle knew that Hestia was a very sensitive god, and he could only attribute it to himself. It is because of his special reasons that Hestia god can think less. Well, Belle is taking care of my emotions. Hestia wasn't a pure idiot either, she felt the reason why Mr. Belle said these words. Isn't it to let her not care about the shabby place where she lives? However, as a god, he is taken care of by his own children, which is not good news. Okay. Lord Belle, I've decided. Now let's settle in that abandoned church first, and when our relatives save enough money, we must change to a bigger house. Lord God, that's the kind of momentum. Seeing Hestia's smile resumed, Belle also encouraged her. Although in various senses, he was taken care of by his own child, but this feeling of being taken care of by a child was the first time, and Hestia also liked it very much. Rearranging her posture, Hestia adjusted her emotions and held her child's hand. Then go to the new clan of our Hestia family first. The ruins of the church are really in a very remote place, almost the most remote place in this Orali. There is no family to choose such a ruin, and there will not be any family around. The level of remoteness is truly unmatched by any familiar. Of course, there is nothing bad except that it is really a ruin. If this place can really be rebuilt, there is nothing wrong with being a clan's land. It is a pity that the cost of rebuilding this part of the area is too high, even far more than buying a property outright. Therefore, This area is destined to be only a temporary place to stay. Hestia, who came here for the first time, also felt that it was more shabby than she imagined. Wow, this ruin is really shabby enough. But when he thought that he still set such a shabby place as the clan of their Hestia family, Hestia felt that he had really lost his majesty as a god. Hestia was a little worried about her first child's thoughts, and she looked at Mr. Bell carefully. After all, it's a ruin, and the Lord God doesn't have to have too many expectations. It's much better as a foothold for the time being. It only needs to do a simple treatment, at least the church can accommodate people. I'll have to check the situation nearby later. Bell is not worried about the safety of this ruins. He and Hestia are the only gods in the Hestia family. As long as his parameters are not lost, no gods will pay attention to them. But a cursory observation is still quite necessary. But if he continues according to his situation, if he doesn't want his own situation to be exposed, he needs the help of other family members to help cover. The most suitable family is undoubtedly the Loki family. After all, it is the second most powerful family, and the strength of the Loki family does not allow others to make irresponsible remarks. However, this is based on the improvement of personal strength. Only after the strength of the individual has been improved is it necessary to hide it, otherwise there is no need to worry that someone will pay attention to him. Bell knew this very well. Lord God, it's going to be night soon, we also need to find a place to sleep first. Ah, that's what I said. Hestia noticed that the sky was getting dark, and it was necessary to prepare before it officially fell into the night. It's hard to imagine that there are those lighting tools in this kind of ruins. It should be lighted with firewood and other things tonight. Thinking of this, Hestia had the thought of if I knew it earlier, I would continue to stay at Hephaesth's house, but seeing the family around her, the first child in her family, Hestia got rid of that decadent state. In the past, I was decadent because I was alone, but now I am not alone. It is impossible to continue to be decadent. Mr. Bell, decide where you want to live before it gets dark. Well, you need to do some cleaning work. Lord God, I actually do the cleaning myself. Wrong. Hestia interrupted Bell. Of course, she knew that Bell could do well by herself, but as the god of the family, how could she watch her own children do it? She also has to do these jobs. You must take back your majesty as a god. Hestia interrupted Bell with a serious look. Mr. Bell, this is the first mission for our Hestia family. Although we don't have enough money to buy the best real estate, at least we need to work together to clean up the place where we temporarily live. Seeing this, Bell couldn't refuse. Hestia took advantage of the situation to pursue. Belcoen, don't think of me as a useless god who can't do anything. I can also do simple jobs. So, you have to rely on me more in the future. I see, Lord God. Bell sighed slightly, but also let go of some caution in his heart. P.S. For collections, for flowers, for evaluation, celebrating the 7-day National Day holiday and reading books. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediately rush to recharge. Event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 12 The Cannibal Dungeon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A place with eaves to keep out the wind and rain was soon found among the forgotten ruins, a church that was almost scrapped. There are still a lot of worship chairs inside the church. It seems that they have not rotted yet. There are still many things that can be used. There is also a confessional room in the church. In addition to a lot of dust, there is a sofa and bed that is not particularly shabby. I just don't know why there is a bed in the confession room. I really don't understand what the bed in the confession room is used for. The sheets on the bed didn't have some strange traces in those insides, but they had turned gray because they had not been used for a long time. If it is not cleaned, the sheets will definitely have to be replaced. Luckily Bell has a change sheet in his mind space. It's been 3 hours since the simple cleaning was done. What? Without the image of the goddess, Hestia lay on the bed that had been tidied up. It takes a lot of physical and energy to clean up this piece of ruins. In 3 hours, I have done a lot of things, even more than the things that came to the lower realm. So, now Hestia is super tired, lying on the slightly hard mattress with body aches. Compared to He-Faith's house, it's much worse. Hestia couldn't help but miss her life as a crippled person, but as soon as he turned his head, he saw Belle, who was also busy just now. The decadent look just now disappeared, and he even sat up straight from the bed. No way, Hestia. You're not the kind of cripple you were before. You have a child now. Hestia, who just thought so, sat up instantly. Mr. Bell. Bell, who had just finished his work, saw Lord God sitting and looking at him. It was just that sitting posture that made Bell take a step forward and said, "I'm sorry, Lord God," changing the wild sitting posture of Lord God. When the white dress sat up cross-legged, I really saw it all, and the picture was still not very good. Lord God, you usually need to pay more attention to wearing such thin clothes. That kind of sitting position is too easy to lose. Hestia only heard "ah," and quickly grabbed her skirt with both hands. The cute face was instantly flushed. Apparently she forgot that they were going to live together in the future, and it was a boy who lived together. Well, I'm going to live with Belle-kun in the future, so I also need to pay attention to this issue. Hestia took a deep breath and made some adjustments before speaking. Mr. Bell, from today onwards, you are the first servant of my Hestia family, so you also need to pay attention. Because you are my only servant, if something happens to you, I will be hit very hard. The implication of this sentence is to write "please don't die" casually on the face. Bell certainly understood the implication. He's not an idiot, and he doesn't take risks and die casually. A lot of things need to be done step by step to get results, and they often become a swathe of loss in one fell swoop. Just because he desires power, he will cherish himself even more. Lord God, please don't worry. What I desire is strength, not death. It is inevitable to put in effort and risk in order to gain strength, but I will also move forward step by step, and I will not be planted in the dungeon all at once. Go in. That's fine. Hestia was obviously relieved, and she was really worried that her child would be too eager for power and planted in the dungeon. Although he never had a family, Hestia often heard from her friends in Orari that many children would jump into danger. She didn't know about the others, but for Belle, Hestia really didn't want such a thing to happen. So, what will Belle-kun do next? Go to the dungeon to get used to the environment first. Belle nodded slightly. That's what I planned. The environment outside is very dangerous, but I heard that the dungeon is much more dangerous than the outside. City that eats people, I know it means the dungeon. The upper level closer to the surface will be safer, but the further down you go, the more dangerous the dungeon. I don't plan to go to too dangerous places until I'm not used to dungeons and I haven't upgraded yet. Dungeons are dangerous. But as long as the danger of the dungeon is controlled within a certain range, the danger of the dungeon will become its own nutrient little by little. Given the dangerous nature of the dungeon, Belle also doesn't plan to go too deep. No matter now or in the future, he must do his duty as a coward. He is not an experienced adventurer, so he needs to go through dungeons to quickly accumulate experience. Sure enough, I don't need to worry too much about this child. Hestia was really relieved now. It is not a bad thing to have a desire to face power, but this desire needs to be curbed. You need to do as many things as your own strength is. Going beyond this stage will only bring you trouble. Hestia doesn't need to worry about this issue. Hestia looked at her child with approval. Well, Mr. Bell, your idea is correct. The dungeon is a very dangerous place. As an inexperienced rookie adventurer, what you need to do is not to enter the lower layer of the dungeon, but to absorb the experience better. You need to get used to dungeons, and you need to know that dungeons have the desire to devour everything at all times. Desire to devour everything. Is the dungeon really alive? Bell raised his brows, and then his brows began to knit together. Hestia nodded solemnly, while speaking with a cautious attitude. A dungeon is a living creature. It's just that it doesn't have self-awareness, but only an instinctive reaction. It's always alive. It's like a mother's womb that nurtures monsters. It hates gods and always all can breed monsters, in order to devour the whole world. That's why Orari was built on top of the dungeon. This is to suppress the number of monsters bred in the dungeon, and to control the number of monsters in the dungeon. If the dungeon is not suppressed, the dungeon breeds the monsters will erode the whole world. And the bottom layer of the dungeon is also the core of the dungeon. It is said that because the core of the dungeon is controlled, it will become a breeding ground for monsters. There was only so much Hestia knew. The deep secret of the dungeon is not something she can know, or there are not many people who know this secret among the gods. As for why you told Bel, it was to let Bel know the dangers of dungeons. The first reaction in Bel's mind upon hearing this information was one-eyed black dragon, P.S., for collections, for flowers, for evaluation. P.S. The cover has been sealed, and I asked to be able to change it at night, celebrating the 7-day National Day holiday and reading books. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediately rush to recharge. Event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 13. Good night on the first day. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A dungeon is a mother's womb that nurtures monsters. It's not a very unexpected result. In this case, the reason why those monsters can be born in the wall is clear. However, this mother's womb is controlled by that black dragon. It's a bit unexpected. No wonder Orari is built on the dungeon. I am afraid that in addition to suppressing the birth of monsters in the dungeon, Orari also hopes to grasp the core of this dungeon after defeating the black dragon. As long as the dungeon's with the core in hand, even if the black dragon is defeated, it does not mean the destruction of the dungeon, and this playground of the gods will not close. However, the former Hera family and Zeus family at the same time defeated the black dragon and faced a situation of total annihilation. It seems that the biggest reason is that the black dragon holds the core of the dungeon. But there must be other reasons, otherwise it has LV. The two powerful families of .8 and LV.9 will not be completely destroyed. There must have been some unknown reason for Bel's instinct. But the content of that part has not been written, and he has not even read the whole story of the wrong place. Having committed Wikipedia, read Wikipedia, and knowing some simple stories and characters does not mean that you fully understand. Bel has always held the greatest awe for the unknown, those things he didn't know. Bel didn't want to make random guesses, but this part of the information related to the dungeon needed to be put in the notebook. Even if it's not random guessing, it's definitely right to collect more information. If other information is found in the future, maybe it can really be integrated, and there is speculation about what happened in that year. Seeing how Bel listened so carefully and was still thinking seriously, Hestia nodded slightly. After waiting for a while, Hestia continued the topic just now after seeing Bel recovering from her thoughts. So, Mr. Bel, if you want to enter the dungeon, don't underestimate the dungeon. There are also many incredible things in the dungeon. Once you enter, it is not easy to rescue, you need to ensure your own safety. Feeling the care of God Hestia, Bel naturally took these words to heart. Like Bel had just said, he wasn't an adventurous person. Killing yourself when you can accumulate power is the act of an idiot. Even if you want to leapfrog to kill monsters, you need to have the corresponding conditions and skills. Leveraging an era by yourself requires a stable foundation. Without these conditions, let alone an era, it is a question of whether it can pry the enemy in front of you. Please rest assured, Lord God. I will be extra careful after entering the dungeon. I am also a coward who is afraid of death. I will not let myself die in the dungeon so easily. Of course, having said that, Bel also had other purposes in entering the dungeon, money and skill. The Type Moon system gave the possibility to exchange money for growth, and Bel naturally would not give up. Power may be sold with money, but skill is definitely not something that can be simply bought with money. So the best thing about dungeons is the place to accumulate initial wealth and skills. The combat intensity of the upper level of the dungeon is not particularly high, and it is more to let the rookie adventurer get used to the dungeon initially. This is also to lay a solid foundation for the subsequent entry into the middle and lower layers. Bel agrees. Hestia was obviously relieved to hear Bel's assurance. As long as Bel doesn't just go deeper into the dungeon, the danger is much less. After I relaxed my mind, I felt tired from cleaning the room just now. Hestia yawned, her eyes narrowed involuntarily, and she habitually raised her hand to wipe her eyes. Seeing Hestia looking tired, Bel didn't linger any longer. He put the quilt on the sofa, took off his shoes and lay down. Lord God, let's talk about other things tomorrow. Well, I'm sleepy too. Speaking of which, Hestia couldn't even open her eyes, and yawned on the wooden bed. Looking at Bel, who was sleeping on the sofa not far away, with squinted eyes, a smile appeared in the corner of Hestia's eyes. Today is really a good day. Belkuin joined my family, and I will be a god with a family in the future. At this time, Bel extinguished the candle next to him. A plume of white smoke rose from the wick, and the smell of burning candles filled the room. In the dimly lit room, both of them lay quietly on their beds and sofas. Bel, who had been tired all day, soon fell asleep. With a face on the road for more than 10 days, every day in addition to rushing on the road, he is careful about the people around him, which made Bel exhausted physically and mentally long ago. Lying down on the sofa and sleeping in peace is the best reward for Bel. Bel fell asleep, but Hestia, who was sleepy just now, only closed her eyes for a while before she woke up. Mr. Bel, are you awake? Only the even breathing sounded in response to Hestia. Are you asleep? Belkuin looks tired. Although I don't know what Bel went through to come to Orari, this sleeping method must be very tiring. Hestia unconsciously sat up from the bed. She didn't say anything, just quietly looked at Bel sleeping on the sofa next to her. I really didn't expect my first family to come like this. Now that I think about it, her meeting with Bel was really dramatic. She wouldn't have met Bel if she hadn't gone to He Faith to complain because she was in a bad mood because of being rejected by the adventurer. And he won't become his god when Bel comes to ask Faith to introduce him. Hestia narrowed her eyes slightly, and an emotion called luck used her heart. Time passed by, and the moonlight from outside the room came in through the window. The cool moonlight radiated a faint white light, shining on Bel's face sleeping on the sofa. Under the bright moonlight, Bel's slightly fair skin became even brighter. The flawless sleeping face made Hestia stunned for a while. So cute. Hestia had felt that Bel had grown up on her aesthetics before. Looking at Bel's sleeping face in the moonlight now confirms my thoughts. Bel is really cute now, like a newborn baby sleeping peacefully. Although she wanted to reach out and touch it, Hestia didn't forget that it was bedtime, so she held back. My kids are so cute. As a god, Hestia was very satisfied and the corner of her mouth raised a slight arc. Looking at it, Hestia slowly felt some sleepiness. He closed his eyes, and soon his consciousness completely fell asleep. P.S. For collections, for flowers, for evaluation, celebrating the 7-day National Day holiday and reading books. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediately rush to recharge. Event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 14 Entering the Dungeon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After more than 10 days of non-stop driving, this is the first time that Bel can continue to sleep without getting up early after the journey. The sky was completely bright, and the sun was shining brightly on Bel's face. The orange-yellow light made the closed eyes uncomfortable, and Bel subconsciously blocked the sunlight with his hands. But he felt that his hand was bound, and it was a soft feeling. This made Bel's mind keep playing. Bel forced his eyes open against the sun, but it took a long time to get used to it. Wait until your eyes adjust before turning your head to look at your arms. Hestia, God. Bel looked at Hestia, who was sleeping beside him with his arms, in astonishment, and his eyes swept over habitually. Hestia was not covered with a quilt, but almost all of her body was attached to him. The soft feeling on his arm was Hestia's indescribable heart. Really big. Even Bel, who knew Hestia's physique for a long time, couldn't consciously exclaim in his heart. Still, Bel carefully pulled his hand out. It wasn't that Bel didn't want to continue taking advantage. In fact, he really wanted to throw himself into Hestia's arms and feel how big her heart was, but that's not what to do now. It's also not the most needed thing right now. Strength is the necessary condition for the realization of desire, and any excessive ideas need to be based on strength. This is a very cruel reality. If you want to win the favor of the gods, all you need to do is to show the qualities and abilities that make the gods greedy. Otherwise, the so-called wish is to be a hooligan. Belle took a deep breath and carefully got up from the sofa. But the movement of getting up was so big that it woke Hestia, who was still asleep. "Mr. Bell, are you up so early?" Hestia usually doesn't get up so early, and now she's still sleepy. Squinting eyes as if falling asleep at any moment. That look also made Bell shake his head slightly. "Lord God, I'm going to go to the dungeon while the time is still early." This sentence immediately woke Hestia. Yesterday, she had already told Bell about the dangers of dungeons, and she went to the dungeons the day after knowing the dangers, which was a bit too fast. Going to the dungeon so soon. I know what Lord God is worried about, but the dungeon is also a must-go place. Moreover, even if I enter the dungeon, I won't really go deeper. I personally don't have that strength. Bell could understand Hestia's concern, but he really didn't have the strength to go deep. He clearly understands that he is a whiteboard chicken, not even as good as those adventurers who have entered the dungeon. Will he go to the deep end without any problems? This time, I just want to experience the atmosphere of the dungeon, and I will only experience the battle with monsters on the top floor. The top floor should be the gathering place for new adventurers, and there is a place for new adventurers to accumulate experience. The closer the dungeon is to the ground, the more dangerous it is. On the contrary, the closer it is to the surface, the safer it is. The top floor of the dungeon is that kind of place. Even so, Hestia couldn't stop worrying in her heart. The situation of the dungeon cannot be accurately predicted, and the occasional situation occurs very frequently. This can be seen from the fact that the dungeon consumes the lives of many people every day. The occasional frequency of dungeons is too high, and there is no safety for adventurers who enter them, but Hestia also knew that Belle's desire for power, desire to become stronger, and entering the dungeon for adventure would not change. Because people who pursue strength often have a strong enough obsession, it does not mean that they can give up when there is danger. How did Belle get to the city, if it could ever be given up? You can't arbitrarily keep Belkuin from going to the dungeon. This is Belkuin's wish, and as the Lord God, I also need to work hard to fulfill Belkuin's wish. Although Hestia was full of worry, this worry quickly turned into a light-hearted smile. She didn't want Belle to stop pursuing power because of her own concerns. Considering this, Hestia needs to restrain her worries. Belkuin, you've only just become an adventurer. As a newcomer who has just accepted the favor, you need to be more careful in the dungeon. I'll be here waiting for your return. Belle's mood was a little complicated, but he quickly accepted the care and advice. Lord God, I have my own goals and wishes. My expectations do not allow me to stop here, no matter how embarrassed I am now. Lord God, I want you to promise that I will definitely come back. Taking this oath, Belle went to the dungeon with the blessing of Lord God, prosperity of martial arts. The space for the underground passage leading to the dungeon is not very large. After knowing the reason for Orari's construction, Belle understands that the scale of the passage is also to restrict the monsters in the dungeon from coming to the above world. In the past, there should be a lot of monsters crawling out of the dungeon, especially before the city of Orari was built. It was only one morning, and this entrance did not see too many people. Belle didn't even see many people on the street, and it looked like the city wasn't safe until morning, but that insecurity should have come from Eulalie. This information needs to be recorded. Belle has always been in awe of the city of Orari. There is no one who can guard against thieves for 1,000 days, but the most important thing in this Orari is the thief who has no bottom line. So it is always right to be cautious. Belle carefully pulled up his hood, covered his head, and walked down the dungeon carefully. In the future, you need to cover the hood when you go out to reduce the risk of being seen. After entering the dungeon, Belle did not feel very amazing. After all, after walking down, you will feel that the dungeon is a pothole, but this pothole seems to extend in all directions. Belle took out the map distributed by the guild from the four-dimensional space. Although some areas in the lower layer of the dungeon will change their shape, and they will change every once in a while, thereby confusing adventurers, but there is no such problem in the upper layer. The inner space of the dungeon will not change until the 10th floor, and the guild's map also details the information of these 10th floors. As for the information after the 10th floor, only high-ranking adventurers know it. The guild will advise adventurers to form a team, and the new high-ranking adventurers will be taken to the dungeon by the old high-ranking adventurers. Although the guild's suggestion was actually good intentions, those old and high-ranking adventurers would not have so many good intentions. P.S. For collections, for flowers, for evaluation, celebrating the 7-day National Day holiday and reading books. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediately rush to recharge. Event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 15 Quick Adaptation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Breaking through the current LV.1 stage is Bell's goal at this stage. It takes a certain amount of time to accumulate before reaching this goal. In addition to the accumulation of experience and technology, it is also the accumulation of various ability values. Bell doesn't worry that his attributes aren't growing fast enough. Before he accepted the favor, his physical abilities were already growing fast. The increase in physical strength and agility is exceptionally fast. Otherwise, he would not have walked to the city of Orari in less than a month, having received the favor, allowing him to make faster progress. Bell believes that he will break through the shackles of this boundary soon. It's just that in the process of breaking through, Bell doesn't want to be targeted by anyone, otherwise it might bring him a lot of trouble, but Bell didn't think too much, and now he doesn't have the conditions to be targeted. The only thing you need to pay attention to is not to be seen using the four-dimensional space, otherwise the rumors will soon spread completely in Ulari. And he will soon be the target of some people. Of course it's important to hide yourself, but it's even more important not to be sneaky. All it takes to act is to be careful, not sneaky. Bell's life experience tells him that once someone sees such a sneaky picture, the good people will also stare at him. So Bell just walked down the dungeon with his head covered, carefully listening to the surrounding sounds. The slight footsteps kept appearing around. Bell quickened his pace and walked deeper into the first floor, and the sounds around him became clearer. When they came to a place far from the entrance, Bell suddenly stopped. The clear sound of footsteps around him was also much quieter, but there were still a lot of sounds in Bell's ears. The hand under the windbreaker is already holding the short knife brought from home. The voice in his ear was getting closer, and when the voice appeared behind him, Bell turned around without hesitation. Squinting the picture behind his eyes, a small green goblin came into view. Bell noticed that the goblin stabbed at him with the weapon in his hand, but he turned around and avoided it easily. At the same time, the dagger in his hand slashed across the goblin's necks as they crossed each other. Laugh, that a blood sword spattered from the goblin's neck. It seems that for goblins, the lethality of normal people is the same as them. The goblin that was fatally hit quickly turned into a cloud of black ashes, and gradually sank into the walls of the dungeon. I see. The monsters in the dungeon will die after they receive fatal damage. After death, they will become black ash and reintegrate into the dungeon, and will be transformed into the next monster by the dungeon. The continuous use is in the cycle. It is also a special ability of the dungeon. Then Bell noticed a dagger and a small purple magic stone falling from the ground, apparently dropped by a goblin. But the magic stone Bell is understandable, why even the dagger dropped. The weapons in the hands of monsters are given at the same time as they were created in the dungeon, and they are also part of the monsters. As long as the monster's weapon is not properly dropped, it will also turn into black ash and disappear together after the monster is defeated. Looks like my luck is pretty good. Bell deliberately walked over the falling object, and was taken into the four-dimensional space the moment the windbreaker blocked it. Then he took it out of the four-dimensional space and held it in his hand. Knocked with the dagger he brought with him and the goblin dagger, a gap appeared on the blade of the dagger that Bell brought from home, but the goblin dagger was safe. Sure enough, the difference in equipment is also quite obvious. The daggers held by the first-tier goblins are so sharp, but can such goblins drop weapons so easily? Bell felt a little doubt in his heart. But this layer of doubts quickly subsided. It doesn't matter whether it is easy to fall or not, it means that the short knives that come with it can be retired. As for whether it is so easy to drop goblins' knives, try killing other goblins to find out. it's just that Bell now needs a certain amount of time to calm down. The excitement of killing a monster for the first time temporarily suppressed the fear of the unknown. Bell is not a person who is good at confronting fear, especially horror movies once on TV. What this kind of thing needs is adaptation, but Bell's just running out of time to adapt. The sound of footsteps in my ears gradually began to increase. The sound is deliberately controlled, and the sound is not very loud. It should be the sound of a short goblin. Bell worked hard to restore his breathing rate so that his body could adapt to this state as quickly as possible. The hand that was slowly holding the goblin dagger no longer continued to tremble with excitement. Breathing no longer continued to be rapid, but began to maintain a very suitable range. The first thing you need to pay attention to in the wild is your physical strength. This is the same in dungeons, where physical strength and energy are the first things to pay attention to. If you can't measure the upper limit of your physical strength and energy, you will easily fall into the circle of monsters. Soon 4 or 5 goblins were hiding in the darkness nearby, a dark corner that was almost invisible to human eyes. Fortunately, Bell is used to the dark, and his eyes can already see the picture in the dark. This also allowed Bell to officially see what the goblins looked like. The whole body is dark green skin, slender body, ears are a bit sharp, but the expression on his face is abnormally hideous. He held a slightly curved dagger in his backhand. A terrifying cold light can be seen at the edge of the blade, telling its danger all the time. 4, no, 5. Bell's mood is very calm now. It was the first time to face a monster, but the body quickly became accustomed to this state of battle. Why Bell is in this state doesn't know, but his body and consciousness are adapting very quickly. Bell also felt surprisingly focused. Make sure that the 5 goblins are relatively far apart. One-on-one is nothing to be afraid of, but there are more places that need to be taken into account in this kind of surrounded scene. So, I still need to make use of the 4-dimensional space. Using the things stored in the 4-dimensional space to fight will definitely make my battles more convenient. My position is far from the entrance on the first floor. Even a novice would not come to such a remote place. Then, my actions here will not attract the attention of those people. Bell had already made a decision in his heart. In addition to honing his skills this time, he also had to conduct a test on the subject of 4-dimensional space combat use, PS, for collections, for flowers, for evaluation, celebrating the 7-day National Day holiday and reading books. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediately rush to recharge. Event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 16 The First Battle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. First of all, what is needed is to completely cut off the redundant targets. As the first time to fight against multiple goblins by one person, it is important to understand the characteristics of goblins one-on-one first. Bell didn't feel that he was strong enough to cut the goblin's neck with a knife. As long as the weapon is sharp enough, any monster will die if it is hit. This is not his own strength, but the strength of weapons. Bell immediately stepped up and rushed towards the scattered goblins. The goblin, who had been hiding in the dark, noticed this and immediately charged at Bell with the dagger. Looking at the low-level monsters in the dungeon, there is no wisdom, but fighting in a group does not require wisdom, it comes from instinct. Bell, who was running, quickly found the slowest goblin, and took out 2 short knives from the 4-dimensional space. Aim at the slowest moving goblin and throw it directly. Bell doesn't have a very proficient knife-throwing skills, and can only rely on his own brute force. Fortunately, Bell chose the slowest goblin. The speed itself is not very fast, and the flexibility of the body is also not good. For the short knife that Bell threw with brute force, he can only choose hard resistance. When laugh, that the goblin's instinctive response to the crisis first blocked the deadly dagger that flew to the head, but the slow-moving dagger actually stuck in the goblin's leg. The 2 voices were one after the other, like the sequence of shots of the daggers. Yeah, the goblin in the middle of the knife let out a scream, and turquoise blood dripped from his legs. But because it wasn't a fatal injury, the goblin didn't turn into black ashes, but stared at Bell with blood-red eyes. Success. Bell, who was rushing forward, suddenly stopped. He stretched out his right hand towards the 4 goblins who never stopped, and a fruit tree in the four-dimensional space suddenly appeared in mid-air. Gravity will not allow a tree thrown out of four-dimensional space to remain in mid-air. The fruit tree, which only 3 people could carry, smashed down on the 4 goblins with gravity. The 4 goblins rushing fast enough immediately sensed the danger, and instinctively wanted to jump forward to avoid the danger. However, the fruit tree fell very fast, and the 2 goblins, whose response was only a little slower, were crushed under it. Bell felt a jolt under his feet. He ignored the 2 goblins who fell down, and instead stepped on the trunk of the fruit tree and jumped over. Another dagger appeared in Bell's hand, and his target was the goblin whose leg was pierced through. Bell stepped down the tree trunk. The body continued to accelerate because of the fall, making Bell's speed faster. The goblin who was stabbed in the leg almost instinctively wanted to pull out the short knife that pierced the leg. But before it could do so, the sudden situation made it withdraw its attention. Especially after seeing the human beings they prey rush towards it. This made the goblin immediately pick up the dagger and stab the human. Bell, who had been ready for a long time, stared intently. Holding a short knife in hand to resist, at the same time, the center of gravity of the body shifts to the left during the fast run. Crack! The dagger in Bell's hand was so overwhelmed that it instantly turned to shreds. At the same time, an astonishing force was also conveyed from the short knife to Bell's palm, which also slightly surprised Bell's heart. If he hadn't shifted his center of gravity beforehand, his hand might have been broken directly by this strength. Small in stature, good at hiding in the shadows, and extremely powerful. Is this the goblins born in the dungeons closest to the surface? That if Bell hadn't had some physicality, his hand would have been completely useless with that one blow. This also made Bell understand that even if the goblins on the first floor could be slashed in the neck with a short knife of ordinary quality, it did not mean that the goblins were not strong. The speed of the goblins is not slow at all, and their strength is also frightening. It's just that the goblin's body is not very defensive. But it's also because the goblin's defense is not strong. Otherwise it wouldn't be a monster that LV.1 adventurers can face. Sure enough, a sharp weapon is necessary to face these monsters. At this moment Bell understands why adventurers spend so much on weapons and equipment. In the face of the monsters in the dungeon, if the adventurer does not have a suitable weapon in his hand, the adventurer will be completely at a disadvantage. Bell immediately took out the goblin knife from the four-dimensional space. Before the goblin was ready, he immediately crossed the goblin's neck. Laugh! A turquoise blood sword flew into the air, and Bell, who couldn't dodge in time, was directly smeared by the blood of the goblins. I didn't feel any burning or strangeness. It seemed that the blood of this goblin didn't have that ability. This is almost the general situation of the first layer of goblins. The goblin whose neck was smeared with a knife had turned into black ashes when Bell thought so, and was absorbed by the dungeon again. A goblin knife and a small magic stone appeared on the ground. This made Bell a little surprised, but he didn't think about the explosion rate at this time. Putting away the magic stone and goblin knives on the ground, Bell immediately turned around. Raise your hand to restore the fruit tree back to the four-dimensional space. It was at this time that Bell noticed that as long as something was recorded in the four-dimensional space, it would be marked. Marked items are recyclable. As for whether there is a distance limit, it will take a certain experiment to know. Bell, who recovered the fruit trees, immediately took out 2 goblin knives from the four-dimensional space with both hands. Aiming at the back of the goblin's head, who hadn't stood up yet, he threw it away. At the same time, Bell also noticed that one goblin had bypassed a certain distance, and the other had fallen to the ground with its face on the ground. Good chance. The dagger recovered from the goblin appeared again in the running Bell's hand. The speed on his feet was even faster, and in less than a second, he arrived at the goblin who was lying on the ground and was about to get up and adjust his posture. Laugh! The instant the goblin raised his head, the dagger in Bell's hand slid across the goblin's neck. A blood sword splashed up. Only this time Bell didn't stop, glanced at the 2 goblins in the back of his head, and quickly rushed towards the living goblin. Yeah, the last goblin roared angrily as the other goblins were killed. Holding the short knife in both hands, he attacked Bell directly. Bell's eyes narrowed and he accelerated. The short knife in his hand was also ready. and at the same time he began to shift his focus quietly. Just as Bell and the goblins were about to make contact, Bell quickly changed his center of gravity. But what Bell didn't expect was that the goblins also changed their posture during the attack, and the posture of holding the knife with both hands became one-handed and wrote at Bell, P.S., ask for collection, ask for flowers, ask for evaluation, celebrating the 7-day National Day holiday and reading books. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediately rush to recharge, event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 17 The Accumulation of the First Layer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Really? Bell smiled slightly. This time he didn't adjust the center of gravity to the left, he just adjusted the center of gravity to the rear left. The goblin's dagger happened to swipe right beside him, not even the edge. Without waiting for the goblins to regain their stance, the short knife that had been prepared for a long time slashed directly through the goblins' throats. The goblin's head was not cut off with a single knife, but the goblin was still fatally injured. All 5 goblins were destroyed. Bell got 5 goblin knives and 5 small magic stones. This explosion rate is too high, isn't it? Is it so easy for drops from monsters? But even if Bell didn't finish reading this anime, he knew that the drop probability from monsters would not be high. It is a problem to know whether the primary monsters can accurately drop the magic stones, and it is a fantasy to want to explode the drops of the monsters, but the drops that should have a very low explosion rate turned into 100% on his side, which was really a little weird. No matter what Bell thinks about this drop rate situation, it seems like it can only be down to luck. After all, the monsters in the dungeon can't be controlled. Even if they are controlled, they won't let the monsters explode for him, right? Bell doesn't think the drop has a directional function. Maybe it's luck. Bell shook his head and stopped caring about the problem. In fact, the explosion rate of monsters has little impact. As long as it is not targeted by someone with a heart, no one will notice it. Also, Bell doesn't think he'll be casually teaming up with others in the future. After all, this is a dungeon, so don't think too much of a dungeon. The fact that teammates are often scammers has long been deeply rooted in Bell's heart. He is not like the noble character in the original book, who can casually hand over his back to someone he just met. Knowing that people are sinister, the last thing he doesn't trust is teammates. You still need to be careful in the next time, and it will take some time to grow before you can reveal some information. In order to ensure the uniqueness of the information, Bell is not prepared to let himself be noticed by others anytime soon. Even if it is unavoidable to face the situation of exposing intelligence in the future, it is only after accumulating a certain amount of experience. All you need to do now is keep your secrets. It's those goblins, they don't look like creatures without intelligence at all. They will be quickly alerted just by using the method once. Are those guys a Saint Seiya in their previous life? Regardless of whether these monsters have the characteristics of Saint Seiya, it would be too much to say that these monsters have no wisdom at all. Without wisdom, would they have seen a trick and tried to counter it? If I hadn't been more careful, I was hit with a knife just now. But it's troublesome. Bell is now questioning the idea that monsters don't have intelligence. A lot of problems can be seen from just one goblin, and monsters without intelligence will not have the kind of operation just now. Glancing at the guild information in his hand, Bell frowned slightly. The inaccuracy of the guide at the beginning caused Bell to have a lot of doubts about this information. As for whether there is a problem with the later guide, it seems that it needs to be paid attention to. Suddenly, there were a lot of footsteps in my ears. Bell stopped thinking and put the magic stone and goblin knives on the ground into the four-dimensional space. Don't think about those things casually in this dungeon, at least until you're not sure about the safety of your surroundings. The data of the goblins have been collected. Both agility and agility are very common, and their own defense is very low. Ordinary weapons can cause damage, but their strength is astonishing. However, as long as you avoid confrontation with goblins, you don't have to worry about the strength of goblins. Considering the speed and flexibility of those goblins, you can hunt a lot of goblins with just one chance. Next, we need to do more activities on this floor. Bell listened carefully to the sounds around him. Following the battle just now, Bell clearly felt that his sense of hearing and smell were much sharper. Although there is no way to find the specific location of monsters by smell, he can judge whether there are monsters moving around by hearing. Through his voice, Bell confirmed the movement of monsters around. The volume of the sound is on the same level as that of goblins, so it can be judged that it is the goblins generated in the dungeon. Forget about the rest, let's put together the 10 consecutive money first. Next is my daily accumulation. The first level of the dungeon is not a waste of time for many adventurers. Because the first layer of chance will only generate goblins, and goblins will almost only drop magic stones, and it is still probabilistic. Therefore, there are almost no adventurers who waste time on the first floor after passing the first stage, but Bell is an exception. Goblin is not low for his explosion rate, it is magic stone and goblin knife. For him, it was better to spend the first day on the first floor rather than risk it to the second floor. In fact, Bell does exactly that, entering the dungeon when it is only early in the morning, and only come out of the dungeon when the sun goes down in the afternoon. Before officially walking out of the dungeon, Bell carefully covered his appearance with a hood. It's just that this kind of behavior looks a little suspicious, but after being noticed a little, he retracted his gaze. Because of what? Of course, because Bell has only a simple windbreaker, there is not even a backpack behind the windbreaker. In such a situation, everyone knows that this person is a pure newcomer, and this dress may be just to cover up ugliness. With this look on, Bell went directly to the guild. Magic stones collected in dungeons require some processing. In addition to the magic stone, there are also a lot of goblin knives that need to be dealt with. For daily use, it is conservatively estimated that at the upper level, it is almost enough to keep 20. The 2 floors closest to the ground are relatively weak monsters, and they will not encounter a situation that the goblin knives can't face. In that situation, Bell would have no choice but to find a chance to run away. I hope Miss Aegina is still here. Bell quickened his pace on the way to the guild. Before the sun completely sets, he has to go home to report the safety of the Lord God. If he doesn't hurry, it will definitely be a waste of time when he taps the magic stone and the dropped objects later. In fact, the working hours of the guild are very long, even longer than Bell imagined. From dawn in the morning, which is exactly 9 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the evening, it is really a long working time. However, the guild's usual work is not very complicated. Even if the working hours are not short, it will not feel too tired, it's just that there will be time for shifts to rest in the middle. If you encounter a shift, you may not really see anyone, it's just that Bell was lucky today. P.S. For collections, for flowers, for evaluation, celebrating the 7-day National Day holiday and reading books. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediately rush to recharge. Event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 18 Shocked Aegina. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Just before the sun went down, Bell came to the guild. At this time, because it was the afternoon when the sun was setting, the adventurers who were still working hard in the dungeon had not come up yet, but the adventurers on the upper floors had already returned. This time difference also caused the guild to be very free now, and the busy time has just passed. Bell, who came to the guild, saw Miss Ina sitting in the front desk office for the first time. Luckily, you don't have to approach the receptionist you don't know. Bell thought about it and walked directly in the direction of Miss Aegina. Miss Ina. Aegina, who had been busy just now, suddenly heard a familiar voice. Looking up, isn't this the rookie who just became a new adventurer yesterday? Aegina remembered that the child was called Bell Crannel, and she was a fairly self-aware adventurer. She also said some rude things to the child for this reason. Thinking of the rude words she said to this child last time, Aegina became a lot more serious. As a receptionist she knew she was being treated right, but as a person she knew that what she said was actually a bit hurtful. Especially after knowing that this child is very sensible, I couldn't help but feel some apologies in my heart. However, Aegina also knew that as a receptionist, she couldn't get too close with adventurers, because it would cause a lot of carrying relationships. Therefore, Aegina's compensation method is to use her work attitude. Looking closely now, Aegina noticed that there was still some green stuff left on Bell's face. This is blood, it should be the blood of goblins. It seemed that he had just returned from the dungeon, so he should have just gone to the first floor. Bell-kun, did you just come back from the dungeon? Yeah. I'm just wandering around in the novice area to see those goblins. In fact, after I got in touch, I realized that even the top goblins can't be solved. If it wasn't for my luck, maybe it won't be as smooth as it is today. Aegina looked carefully at the boy in front of her. To be honest, at the age of 14, in fact, this age is still within the range of impulsiveness. If you can be older, it may be better to face the dungeon. It's just that Aina can only sigh in her heart. After all, this kind of thing is not something she can change. As an adventurer, you must go to the dungeon, just like a fisherman must go fishing. This is the inevitable result that cannot be changed. Especially as a receptionist, it's slightly beyond her purview to intervene without permission. I came here today in the hope that Miss Aegina can help me with some things. Bell didn't beat around the bush, but just got straight to the point. There are only a few reasons why he came to the guild as an adventurer. In addition to wanting to know the periodic information of the dungeon, the other is to deal with the magic stones and drops obtained in the dungeon. Aegina immediately understood what it meant. It's just that she doesn't quite understand why she needs her help. The guild has a special counter that sells magic stones and drops, and that counter is right next to it. Do you just want her to help out? But Aegina doesn't look the same. Is it for some reason? Aegina didn't know what the reason was, but she didn't ask directly. The reason she couldn't tell might be the reason for asking her for help. So Aegina nodded slightly and stood up from her seat, pointing to the room next to her for private affairs. Then Bell, you go to that room and wait for me, I'll be right over. Thanks. Bell was grateful that Miss Aegina could take his word for it. It seemed that this Miss Aegina really had a better temper than he imagined. If that's the case, I'd better let Miss Aina help me when dealing with magic stones and drops. He stood up and walked to the room that Aegina-san had just pointed to. There is no lock outside, just open the door and you can go in. But when closing the door, Bell noticed that there were many special locks inside the door. After the door was closed, there was no sound outside, and there was no light in the room, not even a window. The lighting used an orange-yellow magic stone. The confidentiality of the room can be guaranteed. As long as someone doesn't directly see me taking out a large number of magic stones and drops, no one can know the skills. Unless Aegina-san is controlled and revealed unconsciously. Something happened. But it's definitely not a human who can do such a thing. The hidden from God can only be seen by luck. As long as the luck is good enough, no one will notice a small person like me. In addition, there is a long table in the center of the room, and there are sofas for several people on both sides. Bell did not choose to sit down, but stood by and waited for Miss Aegina to arrive. Soon Aegina walked into the room alone. Opening the room, she noticed that Bell was standing there waiting for her. Aegina was taken aback for a moment, then beckoned Bell to sit down. Mr. Bell, sit down first. Bell was not pretentious, and sat directly opposite Miss Aegina. Mr. Bell, what are you dealing with? Aegina now wonders why Bell spoke to her alone. If she just sold some magic stones and drops, she might really have to talk about it. Jokes at work are no joke, of course. Bell is not joking. Since going to the dungeon to harvest magic stones and drops in the future still needs to be handled by Miss Aegina, he also needs to inform Miss Aegina of some of his circumstances. Bell folded his hands together and made some noises at the same time, then slowly opened it, and countless magic stones fell on the table like rain. The well-informed Aegina was stunned for a moment. What did Bell-kun did just now? With this thought, Aina subconsciously grabbed Bell's hand. It is confirmed that there are no holes in the palm, so how did the large number of magic stones that fell on the table appear? Magic. Aina understood in an instant. The reason why Bell was able to slap with both hands just now and countless magic stones fell from his palms was because of magic. But Aegina was also aware of the nature of this magic, and then she understood why Bell was so careful. Bell-kun, just now, was that magic? Bell nodded slightly. Is A magic of a spatial nature. The kind that can store items. Bell nodded again, having confirmed this, Aegina instantly covered her face. At this moment, she realized the seriousness of the problem. If Bell's magic is exposed, then the entire Orari gods will come to rob people. P.S. Ask for collection, ask for flowers, ask for evaluation, celebrating the 7-day National Day holiday and reading books. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediately rush to recharge. Event time, October 1st to October 7th. Chapter 19 Strange Phenomena. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Space-type magic, and it's still a magic that can store things. Space-type magic almost doesn't exist, and it's still a rare space magic with storage properties. If that Loki god knew, he would definitely excited to the point of madness. Aegina had almost imagined the image of Loki going mad. After all of Orari knew that every expedition Loki Familia would give up the expedition because it couldn't get too many things. In other words, as long as there is one person in the Loki Familia who can possess space magic, then the expedition of the Loki Familia can open up a new level of the dungeon. Unfortunately, this child who can use space magic did not join the Loki family. If this child's abilities did not change after joining the Loki family, the god of Loki might really be going crazy with laughter. However, Aegina quickly raised her head. Belkuan, since it's such an important matter, you should keep it a secret. You should go back to your family to sell the magic stone, and then repackage it and sell it. In this case, you can't keep it a secret. It wasn't that Bell didn't know this, but he really couldn't do it. Helplessly covering his face, this approach is just to make himself more conspicuous. Exposed to one person and to everyone, a choice Bell knows how to do with his eyes closed. Miss Aegina, what I want to sell isn't just magic stones. If it's just magic stones, then I don't have to expose my magic. But what I get in the dungeon is not just magic stones. Not just magic stones. Aegina couldn't react for a while. And the drop? But Aegina knew that the probability of dropping items from monsters was very low. How could she also need to expose her special magic when buying 1 or 2 items? And just when Aegina couldn't understand, Bell moved directly. Pa snapped his fingers, and a large number of ding-ding-ding weapon falling sounds began to appear in the open space of the room. This phenomenon even lasted for a while before it stopped. But in such a short time, it almost filled the whole room. Bell sighed deeply. I don't know if he was lucky or not. After the goblin is killed, a magic stone and a short knife will appear. The magic stone should definitely be a normal drop from goblins, but the dagger is definitely not. It is because of this understanding that Bell chose to expose one of his whole cards. It's not because he doesn't want to hide it, it's because there are too many goblin knives, so that once he sells it, he will definitely be stared at by those who are interested. It hurts too much to be stared at this early stage. So Bell's choice was to expose his cards to the safest possible person. So much. Aegina was bewildered by the series of voices and the pile of knives. With a stiff neck, she turned her head to look at Bell, and pointed to the pile of knives lying on the ground next to her. Belkuan, are they all dropped items? Bell nodded helplessly and embarrassedly. After confirming this, Aegina's face twitched. What's up with this amount of drops? Even a big family like the Loki familiar couldn't get so many drops in one expedition. This amount was several times exaggerated than the drops the guild received every day. Aegina then picked up a short knife and examined it carefully. Then she quickly realized the origin of these short knives. She raised her head sharply and looked at Bell, who was sitting across from her, and she knew that this was something Bell had exploded from the goblin's body. But why are there so many such ultra-rare drops? Goblins are not a monster that is difficult to kill in a dungeon, or even one of the best monsters to deal with. But it is because of the good solution of the goblins that the drops of goblins are very, very rare, and even so rare that maybe only 10 goblin knives will appear in the guild in a year or two, but there are at least hundreds of goblin knives that have fallen here, and it has soared to the number that the guild will only have for decades. If someone told Aegina before that someone could get so many goblin knives, she would definitely not believe it. It is simply impossible for anyone to have such luck. Mr. Bell, how many goblins did you kill today? Bell reluctantly pointed to the daggers around, and then said a number. 284 in total. Just this amount alone is too much. The first floor of the dungeon will not produce such a large number of goblins. You must know that most of the time monsters are refreshed at a fixed time. According to the number of goblins spawned, they are only spawned 3 times a day, and each time there are only a dozen or so how did the number of 284 come from? Aegina took a deep breath and looked at Bell and asked solemnly. Mr. Bell, did you encounter a monster feast in the dungeon? Miss Aegina thinks there is such a thing as a monster feast on the first floor. Feast of monsters, a situation unique to dungeons. It means that a large number of monsters are born on a floor, but this phenomenon often occurs below the 3rd floor, rather than the 1st floor. Facts and experience have proved that it is impossible for a monster feast to appear on the 1st floor, otherwise the entrance to the dungeon would have been blasted long ago. Aegina also realized that she was wrong, there should be no monster feast on the 1st floor. However, Aegina also reacted, even if it is a monster feast, it is impossible for 284 monsters to appear in this number. And this number obviously didn't appear all at once. After all, even LV.2 adventurers couldn't resist the attack of so many goblins. So, how did Belkuin meet such a large number of goblins? In fact, Bell has not thought about this issue. Although I felt that the amount of experience accumulated from the goblins was a little too much, but such an amount did not come up all at once. Looking back now, it seems that after he killed one wave, another wave appeared after a while. I don't quite understand it myself. Almost always after I killed 4 or 5 goblins, after some time of adjustment and rest, the next wave of goblins was discovered by me. Except during lunchtime in the middle. After stopping for a long time, within the time I adjusted, I found another wave of goblins that was born after only a short interval. Aegina looked at Bell the first time she got the answer. Obviously, this description and this number of goblins, no matter where you look at it, appear to be because of Bell. Whether it's lunch at noon or the time when the goblins appear between intervals, they all seem to be catering to Bell's state. It's just that Ina didn't know if the answer she got was correct. After all, it was the first time that such a bizarre thing had happened. At least until now, this is the first time such a weird thing has happened. P.S. Ask for collection, ask for flowers, ask for evaluation. P.S. Cough cough, I'm sorry that my condition has not been very good in the past 2 days, celebrating the 7-day National Day holiday and reading books. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediately rush to recharge. Event time, October 1st to October 7th.